On the night of September 12th, 1997, at exactly 12:30 past midnight, one of the strangest crimes ever recorded in Los Angeles, California, took place. 6 men, part of a small crew, broke into a company that specialized in transporting and storing bank cash. Not a bank, like you might assume, but a private company responsible for moving money between bank branches and storing it in ultra-secure, high-tech vaults. At first glance, it sounds like another heist story. Some gang breaks in and steals some cash. But the truth? Way more complicated than that. What happened that night wasn't just a robbery. It was one of the most flawlessly executed and mysterious operations in criminal history. And even though it's officially recognized as the biggest cash heist the world has ever seen, what's really bizarre is the total media blackout surrounding it. The details of this crime didn't come to light until years later, and even now, new bits and pieces still pop up from time to time. There are two big reasons behind all the secrecy. First, the crew pulled off a trick so unexpected, it made figuring out who they were almost impossible. And second, the mastermind behind the whole thing was the last person anyone would have suspected. Like they say, sometimes the thief is the one guarding the vault. In this episode, we're diving into that insane operation. A heist pulled off so smoothly, with so little effort, it felt like something straight out of a Hollywood movie. Every part of it was perfectly calculated, like the guys behind it knew the vault's layout better than their own homes. And the craziest part? It all went down in less than 30 minutes. The crew literally left a party they were attending, pulled off the heist, and then went back like nothing ever happened. This story is packed with details most people have never heard. And as always, we go deeper than anyone else. We've watched dozens of documentaries, broken down every sentence, and dug up the tiniest clues no one ever noticed. So trust me, what you're about to hear, you won't find it anywhere else. Now let's rewind to a day in May of that same year, 1997. A guy named Alan Bees was hanging out at a friend's house during a casual night in. Everyone was joking around, drinking, laughing. And then out of nowhere, Alan says something strange. What if we became millionaires with just one simple plan? Everybody was pretty wasted, so no one took him seriously. They laughed it off, thinking it was a drunk joke. But Alan, he wasn't joking. He asked the question again. This time, one of the guys got curious and asked him, "How?" That's when it hit them. Alan, completely calm and confident, said, "We're going to rob the company I work for." They laughed again, louder this time. That company was known for being a fortress. It was supposed to be unbreakable. But what nobody knew was that Alan didn't show up that night empty-handed. He brought an entire blueprint of the plan. Papers, drawings, detailed schematics. And just like that, the room went dead quiet. The alcohol wore off real fast. What started out as a drunk joke suddenly turned into a real conversation. Now these 6 guys weren't just some random friends. They'd known each other since they were kids. Tight like brothers. The kind of bond where, if one of them called in the middle of the night, the others would be there without even asking why. One day, they decided to take things seriously. They got together on a weekend and went through Alan's plan in detail. It was well thought out, with a few gaps that could be fixed later. And Alan? He wasn't just some employee at the company. His role was much deeper, something you'll understand later on. What he wanted from that meeting was simple: to convince his friends to join him. And he succeeded. The old crew was back. Yeah, that's right. These 6 had once formed a kind of secret gang when they were younger. Nothing criminal, just kids pretending to be spies and action heroes. They had a hidden hangout, coded messages, even their own made-up language. They never stole anything in real life, but they were obsessed with Bruce Lee, Van Damme, Stallone, spy movies, and action flicks. At one point, they all even tried to join the Navy SEALs, but every single one of them failed the exams. As the years passed, they ended up working as civilian volunteers with the police, what they call security safety officers. They were hired to guard public and private buildings through police contracts instead of traditional security firms. So basically, they were civilians wearing official uniforms, trained and assigned to sensitive locations. And that's where the loophole began. The crack in the system Alan and his crew would use to pull off one of the biggest heists in American history. These 6 guys, like we mentioned, were working as security and safety officers, but each one of them was stationed at a different location. As for Alan Bays, he worked for a company called Dunbar Armored. Now, the word armored hadn't been commonly used before, but after the heist, it became a buzzword because it perfectly described how locked down and fortified that place really was. The company was located on a busy, well-known street in Los Angeles, California. Just one floor, but built like a military bunker. Its main job? To transport and safeguard money for banks. So whenever a bank needed to move large sums between branches or a business needed to deposit big cash loads, Dunbar would step in, using armored trucks and high-tech security systems. And one of the company's key services was storing bank funds inside its high-security vaults. Take weekends and holidays, for example, when banks couldn't keep massive amounts of cash in their own vaults. That's when Dunbar would store the money on their behalf, which means, at any given moment, this place held millions of dollars. Alan's job at the company? He was a safety officer. He oversaw all security systems, alarms, fire extinguishers, surveillance cameras, and monitored movements inside the building. He also supervised the actual transfer of money in and out of the vault. Simply put, he saw everything, and he knew everything. And even scarier, he knew the blind spots, the employee routines, the transportation schedules, the system loopholes. He knew that building like the back of his hand. Once his friends agreed to the plan, Alan moved to Phase 2. The first phase was just sharing the general layout, the building's blueprint, daily routines, alarm system placements, camera angles. And because of his position, all that info was legit. He had access to it naturally. Phase 2 took 6 full months. During that time, Alan began probing the security systems for weaknesses. The biggest challenge? There were 2 types of surveillance cameras. Cameras that belonged to the company, and cameras that were directly connected to the LAPD. He knew he could maybe mess with the company's own cameras, but the police ones? No way. Especially the ones that sent live feeds straight to the precinct. So he had to come up with something smart. While working, Alan started what looked like an innocent routine. He began having regular coffee breaks with the surveillance guy during shift changes. That guy's only job was to monitor the cameras. At one point, Alan even considered bringing him in on the plan. But his friends were totally against it. And after watching the guy closely, Alan agreed. He was soft. No backbone. One little push, and he'd spill everything. So he was ruled out. Luckily, Alan didn't need him. His own role gave him unlimited access to the building's systems. And because of the trust he had, nobody ever questioned what he was doing. He didn't raise red flags. He didn't need permission. He was invisible. The first thing he did? He went to management and suggested a review of the camera coverage zones. He told them, with all the right technical jargon, that there were blind spots where the cameras couldn't reach. He recommended adjusting some of the angles to improve visibility. And since this was totally within his job scope, and no one ever imagined someone would dare touch this fortress, the manager just waved it through. The manager literally said, "Alan, you're a trusted guy. Do whatever you think's best." And just like that, Alan started reworking the surveillance system to work for him, step by step. No suspicion at all. But what about those police-linked cameras? Here's where it gets real interesting. Alan discovered that the police didn't actually have direct access to the cameras inside the building. They only reviewed recorded footage after a crime had occurred. In other words, as long as the heist wasn't caught in real time, the police wouldn't know a thing until it was way too late. Even better? The police-linked cameras were only two, and they were both outside the building. So if they could find a way to avoid being seen by those two cameras, they'd have full, unhindered access to the company from the inside. But there was still one massive obstacle: the alarm system. This was directly connected to the police. Any false move, any false trigger, and the cops would surround the building in less than 3 minutes. Alan needed a solution, and fast. There were 21 surveillance cameras inside the company. Bez, ever the meticulous planner, teamed up with the control room operator to run a full diagnostic test on every single one. He stood in front of each camera, taking snapshots of himself to precisely map their fields of vision. He repeated the process across every corridor, angle, and hallway, right under the eyes of the staff and with the company's full knowledge. After all, nothing about this behavior raised suspicion. Once he compiled all the footage, he organized the data into a single file and got to work. His mission? Find the perfect blind path, a way to move through the building without being seen by a single lens. Within just 6 weeks, Bez had mapped out a full route through the facility. He knew exactly when to turn, how fast to walk, and which angles to avoid. He tested it multiple times. He walked down hallways flanked by cameras on both ends, yet not once did a lens catch him. That meant one thing: the alarm system wouldn't trigger. To him, the interior operation was now 100% foolproof. The indoor plan was simple. Once they got in, their first stop would be the control room. There, they'd disable the alarm system completely. No alerts, no sirens. No one would know. What happened inside the fortress would remain a secret. But the real challenge lay outside. The external surveillance cameras, the ones linked directly to the police department. Bez had been collecting data for months, sharing every detail with the rest of the crew. Each one memorized the layout and proposed solutions to the hurdles ahead. Their biggest obstacle? The front and back entrances. Each had 2 cameras, one owned by the company and another directly linked to the police department. Both were fixed in place, covering nearly identical angles. That's when one of them pitched an idea. What if we just tweak the angle on one of the cameras? Just a little? Enough to create a blind spot we can sneak through. It was risky, but Bez believed he could sell it to management. He turned his attention to the rear entrance. The camera there overlooked the street and was meant to capture every vehicle coming in or out. But occasionally, it failed to clearly record license plates. That's when Bez came up with a brilliant security upgrade. He told management, "Let's adjust the camera angle slightly so we can get a clearer view of the license plates. That way, we'll have better records of every transaction." It sounded reasonable, smart even. Management approved the change immediately, What they didn't realize was that the company occasionally rented large moving trucks from a transportation service called U-Haul. These trucks had oversized cargo boxes that completely blocked the view of the rear license plates. In other words, once the camera was adjusted, any U-Haul truck passing by would be completely unidentifiable. Bez had found the perfect loophole. The plan was now crystal clear. The robbery would be carried out using a U-Haul truck. The cameras wouldn't catch the plates. The newly adjusted camera angle would give them a blind spot, a narrow entry point that neither the company's system nor the police's surveillance could see. As for entry and access, Bez had it all covered. He had keys to every door they needed. The rear entrance, office doors, the control room, and even the vault itself. He told the crew with confidence, "We walk in, unlock everything, take the money, and close the doors like nothing happened. No one will notice. We take the security tapes and vanish." But there was still one last problem. How do you move that much cash after the heist? One of them came up with a flawless post-job plan. They'd transport the money in the U-Haul truck, drive to an abandoned location that had been carefully scouted ahead of time, unload the cash into a specially prepared getaway vehicle. Then, each of them would leave separately in their own car. No patterns, no suspicions. And the alibi? That was the clever part. They threw a party. They actually bought tickets to a concert on Friday night, September 12th, 1997, at a local venue called the Beach Lounge. It was their official cover. If anyone ever asked Bez where he was during the robbery, he had a clean, simple answer. "I was at the concert, with my friends." The plan was airtight. The execution? Flawless. But there was one tiny detail they overlooked. And that one detail? It changed everything. Thursday night, September 11th, 1997. Just one day before the job. Something happened that nobody saw coming. Baez got fired. Now that might sound like a regular thing, but in the context of their plan, it was a disaster. Because now, if the robbery happens the next day, who's the first person everyone's going to look at? The guy who just got kicked out. Suddenly, Baez wasn't just a possible suspect. He became the obvious one. And that meant investigations, lots of them, over and over again. All under the assumption he did it out of revenge. But Baez, he wasn't some clueless amateur. He had already spent the past month training with his crew on how to handle interrogations. They ran drills, practiced questions, rehearsed every scenario the cops might throw at them. Baez had every answer down cold, like he'd lived through the questioning already. He planned to walk away from this squeaky clean, but his firing? That changed everything. Turns out the company caught him on security footage using one of their trucks for personal errands, without permission. Worse than that, he'd been practicing how to drive U-Haul trucks using company vehicles. Now, that may sound minor, but not in this company. Their trucks were used to move cash, and the firm had already been targeted in several armed robbery attempts before. So this was a huge breach. No warnings, no second chances. They fired him on the spot, took his keys, shut him out completely. To Baez, it looked like the end. But his crew, they weren't giving up that easy. One of them looked him in the eye and said, "No turning back now. We finish what we started." Friday night, September 12th, 1997. At exactly 9:30 p.m., all 6 guys walked into a packed nightclub called Beach Lounge. Music pumping, lights flashing, crowd buzzing. That was their alibi. They stayed until 11 p.m., made sure to be seen, Smiles, drinks, dancing, photos, witnesses, then quietly slipped out into one car and drove to one of the crew's houses. That's where things got serious. They changed into full black outfits, gloves, masks, everything covered, not just to hide their faces, but to hide their skin. See, all 6 of them were black. So they even changed their voices, throwing in racist remarks and slurs to throw off any potential witness, making them believe the robbers were white. Their first mind game of the night. By 12:30 a.m., they reached the building. Baez led the way. He remembered every camera, every blind spot. Every step had been rehearsed over and over. They walked the path exactly as planned. Ghosts in the dark. At the main door, Baez pulled out his secret weapon, the set of keys he'd made copies of before getting fired. Door unlocked. They walked in like they owned the place, totally invisible to the cameras. First stop, the surveillance room. It was right at the guards' break time. No one was watching the monitors. Perfect. They slipped inside and cut the alarm system, then waited. Minutes later, the security guys came back. 6 masked men, guns drawn. Baez stayed silent, didn't say a word, didn't move, didn't want to risk being recognized. He let one of his boys take charge. The fake leader played dumb, asking the guards where the keys were, how the building worked, what doors went where. They tied the guards up and moved them to a back utility room, then grabbed every single key in the building, 200 to 300 in total. Before they left the surveillance room, they wiped everything. Current tapes, old tapes, even recordings from 2 years ago were erased. They destroyed every shred of evidence. Then they went one step further, cutting the wires to the alarm system completely. So even if someone turned it back on, it wouldn't send a signal to the police. By now, the guards were locked in a steel-reinforced room. Baez and his crew reached the vault, and what they found inside: stacks of cash, piles of money. Baez knew the drill. He went straight for the bags marked with $100 bills, then 50s, then 20s, and outside, right on cue. The U-Haul truck rolled up to the back entrance. No alarms, no alerts, no suspicious footage. Just another delivery truck. They loaded the cash, plus all the surveillance tapes, into the U-Haul and shut it tight. Then Baez and one of the guys doubled back, closed every door behind them, relocked every lock, exactly as it was before. It bought them precious time before anyone realized what had happened. They slipped out, step by step, just like they'd practiced. Not one camera caught them. At exactly 1 a.m., the job was done. They got in Baez's car, drove to a remote meeting spot, where 2 prepped vans were waiting. There, they transferred the money out of the U-Haul and into the vans, and even loaded some into Baez's own car for more confusion. Then, they ditched the U-Haul in a quiet side street, split up, and disappeared into the night, as if nothing ever happened. The second they got out of the building, one of the crew members just lost it, started dancing in the street like a maniac. And honestly, who could blame him? They didn't just pull off a robbery. They walked away with $18.9 million in cold, hard cash. That's right, 18.9 million. Which today, that's over 30 million bucks. They split the money between them. And just like that, it was over. Then, like nothing ever happened, they went straight back to the party at Beach Lounge, the one they'd left earlier. They danced, they laughed, they acted wild till 6 in the morning. They even documented it all, snapped pics, made sure they were seen the entire night. like they'd never stepped away for even a second. Then each of them headed home, crashed in bed, like it was just another night. But the shock didn't take long to hit. 12:30 p.m. the next day. Baez wakes up to banging at his front door. Cops. Now, anyone would assume that's it, game over. But that's not what happened. They questioned him. Once, then again, then again. 4 times in total. But they couldn't pin anything on him. No charges, no arrests, nothing. Baez walked away every time, cool as ice. The only thing police ever found? A broken taillight cover that fell off a getaway car. That's it. No prints, no DNA, no video. And the company? Basically bankrupt. Their security system was toast. As for Baez, he got a new job. His crew kept working like nothing had ever happened. And the money? Not a single dollar was touched. For 6 months, the entire $18.9 million stayed buried, completely off the grid. But the cops? They weren't letting this go. They formed a 15-man task force, top-level investigators. Their only mission? Find the crew, find the money, figure out how the hell this impossible job even happened. But still, no clues, no trail, not even a whisper. Baez and his boys stuck to the plan like pros. No slip-ups, no bragging, no noise. Until they met a lawyer, David Matsumoto, immigration attorney by day. But under the table, he ran some very shady operations. He promised them he could clean the money, launder the whole thing in under 18 months. Fake contracts, paperwork, investments, turn dirty money into clean cash. They agreed. As long as it looked legal, they were in. He started buying them property, cars, businesses, even set up a fake company. Everything went through him, not Baez, so Baez never showed up on paper. Matsumoto warned them, "Don't spend a dime unless it goes through me. One wrong move, and you're done." For his services, Matsumoto and his assistant got a cool $1 million. And for a while, things went smooth. 2 years. Building wealth, little by little, under everyone's radar. Until the fatal mistake. One crew member, Eugene Hill, decided to go solo. He thought, why give the lawyer all this money? I can do it myself. This ain't that hard. Hill knew a real estate agent. The guy pitched him a deal. Buy an old house, fix it up, flip it for profit. Hill didn't think twice. He pulled money from the stash and handed it over. But here's the problem. The bills were still wrapped with the original Dunbar Armored bands. They had everything on them. The company logo, the bank name, the serial numbers, the exact storage and delivery dates. Basically, a smoking gun. The real estate agent? He didn't hesitate. He went straight to the cops. Hill was arrested immediately. And under pressure, he cracked. Confessed to everything. And just like that, the entire operation came crashing down. All $18.9 million was recovered. Every last cent, a dumb ending to one of the smartest, cleanest heists in U.S. history. All because of what investigators later called the dumbest mistake you could possibly make. The crew was rounded up. Some got life, others got 18 years, a few 12 years. As for Baez, they never technically proved he was involved, but the FBI files were clear. If Hill hadn't screwed up, we never would have found them. That robbery, officially labeled the Dunbar Heist, the biggest cash robbery in the history of the United States. The government kept it quiet at the time, for 2 major reasons. First, the banks still used videotapes for surveillance. Revealing how easily they were erased would have caused national panic. Second, the cops considered closing the case publicly, even without recovering the money, just to protect the image of law enforcement. But the truth finally surfaced in 2009. More details came out in 2017, and to this day, some believe Baez and the crew were just the tip of the iceberg. That maybe they were just the front men for something much bigger, something we still haven't seen. And that is the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this wild ride and love crazy real-life crimes, we've got 2 more stories lined up for you right now, right here on screen. The legendary escape from Alcatraz and the brilliant mastermind who hustled Las Vegas casinos. Hit that subscribe button, tap the bell, and stay tuned. Because the next story might just be stranger than fiction. Peace out, and see you in the next one.